The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly before Jake Martinez as he climbed toward the snow-buried treehouse, his tool belt heavy against his hip. 3 months behind on rent, facing eviction, he'd taken this bizarre restoration job from a mysterious client who paid cash up front. What he didn't expect was to find a hidden panel behind rotting wood planks, revealing a room lined with military-grade security equipment and dozens of small pouches glittering with raw diamonds. Jake's calloused hands trembled as he held stones worth more than his entire neighborhood. But this wasn't just any treasure. These diamonds bore the markings of the infamous Antwerp heist of 2001, a crime that left 3 people dead and a billion-dollar syndicate hungry for revenge. As a former military explosives expert turned construction worker, Jake recognized the sophisticated security system immediately. Someone had spent years preparing this hiding spot. The radio in his truck crackled with urgent voices speaking in foreign accents, searching, getting closer. Jake had stumbled into a war he never knew existed. But here's what haunts me about this story. If you found yourself holding a fortune that could solve all your problems, knowing killers were coming for it, what would you do? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jake's breath came in sharp bursts as he crouched in the hidden chamber, fighting the urge to stuff his pockets with enough diamonds to pay off his debts. The voices on the radio grew clearer, closer. Russian, maybe Ukrainian. His time in Afghanistan had taught him to recognize danger in any language. He examined the security system more closely. Military-grade motion sensors, thermal imaging equipment, backup power supplies, all dormant now, covered in dust. Whoever built this fortress had vanished, leaving behind a treasure worth more than most countries' GDP. The treehouse itself was a marvel of engineering disguised as childhood whimsy. Built 30 feet up in an ancient Douglas fir, it commanded a view of 3 mountain valleys. But Jake could see now that every board, every support beam had been carefully chosen. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a watchtower. Papers scattered across a makeshift desk caught his attention. Shipping manifests, warehouse locations, names written in multiple languages. At the center of it all, a photograph, 3 men in expensive suits standing beside what looked like an industrial diamond-cutting operation. One face had been circled in red ink, then crossed out violently. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from his landlord, final notice. Pay by midnight or locks change tomorrow. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he sat, surrounded by enough wealth to buy the entire apartment building, yet touching a single stone could sign his death warrant. A branch snapped somewhere below. Jake froze, straining to listen through the treehouse walls. The Montana wind carried sounds for miles, but that had been close. Too close. Moving with the silent precision his military training had burned into him, Jake eased toward the small window. Through gaps in the evergreen canopy, he spotted movement. 3 figures in winter camouflage, moving with tactical precision up the ridge. They carried assault rifles like men who knew how to use them. His escape routes were limited. The rope ladder he'd climbed was exposed, visible from multiple angles. The emergency zip line he'd discovered running between trees would make too much noise. That left only one option, one he'd hoped never to use again. Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in 2 years. Marcus Cole, his former squad leader, now running private security somewhere in Seattle. Marcus had always said Jake could call if things got desperate enough. Things were desperate enough. The call went to voicemail. Jake whispered urgently, "Marcus, it's Jake. I'm in deep trouble. Montana wilderness, GPS coordinates." He rattled off his location. "International criminals, weapons, probably ex-military. If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, call the FBI and tell them about the Antwerp diamonds." He pocketed the phone, made a decision that went against every survival instinct screaming in his head. Instead of running, Jake began photographing everything. The diamonds, the security equipment, the documents, the photograph of the 3 men. If he didn't make it out alive, at least there would be evidence. The voices were directly below now, speaking in hushed tones. Jake caught fragments. 20 years. Has to be here. Eliminate witnesses. His tool belt suddenly felt heavier, not from the weight of hammers and screwdrivers, but from the small pouch of diamonds he'd unconsciously slipped inside. Insurance, he told himself. Evidence. A metallic click echoed from below, someone testing the rope ladder's anchor points. Jake checked his watch. 40 minutes until sunset. In Afghanistan, they'd called this the golden hour, when shadows grew long and opportunities for escape multiplied. He just had to survive that long. Marcus stared at the sparkling contents of the metal box, his calloused hands trembling as he lifted one of the stones to catch the fading sunlight. The diamond was larger than his thumbnail, perfectly cut, and threw rainbows across the weathered treehouse walls. He'd worked construction for 15 years, handled everything from copper pipes to gold-plated fixtures in mansions he'd never afford, but he'd never seen anything like this. His phone buzzed. Sarah's text read, "Power company called again. Final notice." The irony wasn't lost on him. He was possibly holding millions in his palm while his electricity was about to be cut off. Marcus carefully placed the diamond back among its companions and counted the small felt pouches, 12 in total, each containing between 15 and 20 stones of varying sizes. Even with his limited knowledge of precious gems, he knew this was serious money. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings. People didn't just hide fortunes in abandoned tree houses. This belonged to someone, and that someone probably wasn't the type to file a police report when their property went missing. But Sarah's medical bills had drained their savings, the mortgage was 3 months behind, and his unemployment benefits had run out last week. Marcus climbed down from the treehouse with the metal box tucked under his arm, his mind racing. The smart play would be to turn this over to the police, but smart plays didn't pay for chemotherapy or keep families housed. He needed to know what he was dealing with first. Back home, their cramped apartment felt even smaller as he spread the contents across their kitchen table. Sarah was at her sister's place, giving him time to think without having to explain the impossible. He photographed one of the smaller stones and uploaded it to a jewelry appraisal app, holding his breath as it processed. The estimate made his knees weak, $180,000 to $220,000 for a single stone. Marcus grabbed the bottle of bourbon they'd been saving for better times and poured himself 3 fingers. The math was staggering. If each diamond averaged even a conservative $150,000, he was looking at somewhere north of $200 million sitting on his kitchen table next to Sarah's pill organizer and yesterday's overdue bills. He called his brother Danny, a small-time fence who'd spent more years inside than out. "I need to ask you something hypothetical," Marcus said when Danny picked up. "Jesus, Mark, it's been 2 years since we talked, and you're already into hypotheticals? What kind of trouble are you in? The kind where I need to know how someone would go about selling high-end jewelry without questions." Danny's laugh was harsh. "High-end jewelry? Brother, you can barely afford to keep your lights on. What are you really talking about here?" Marcus hesitated. Danny was family, but family had betrayed him before. "Let's say someone found something valuable, something that might not have clean paperwork. Then that someone would be smart to walk away," Danny said, his voice turning serious. "The kind of jewelry that doesn't have clean paperwork usually belongs to people who solve problems with bullets. How valuable are we talking? Life-changing valuable." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Mark, listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you've found, forget about it. Turn around and walk away. I've seen good people disappear over a lot less than life-changing money." But Marcus was already thinking past the warnings. He'd been careful his whole life, played by the rules, paid his taxes and trusted the system. Where had that gotten him? His wife was dying by degrees while insurance companies found new ways to deny coverage, and he was pulling copper wire out of abandoned buildings for day wages. After Danny hung up, Marcus researched diamond dealers in the city. Most required certifications and provenance documentation, but a few specialized in estate sales and private collections. He selected 3 that seemed legitimate enough to give him real information but discreet enough not to ask too many questions. He was sliding the smallest diamond into his wallet when his phone rang. Sarah's voice was tired but trying to sound upbeat. "How was the job today?" she asked. "Good," he lied smoothly. "Steady work for the next few days, looks like." "That's wonderful. I was thinking maybe we could catch that movie you wanted to see this weekend, if you're feeling up to it." Marcus looked at the fortune spread across their table, then at the stack of medical bills held down by a coffee mug. Sarah still talked about the future like they had one, still made plans like the cancer wasn't winning. Her optimism was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Yeah," he said, carefully gathering the diamonds back into their pouches. "I'd like that." After they hung up, Marcus secured the box in the back of their bedroom closet, behind winter clothes they rarely needed. Tomorrow, he'd take 1 stone to get it properly appraised, just to know for certain what he was dealing with. He poured another bourbon and tried to convince himself he was still in control of the situation. The burner phone buzzed against Viktor Kozlov's chest at exactly 3:47 a.m., jolting him from the first decent sleep he'd managed in weeks. 23 years of hunting had taught him that calls at this hour meant either exceptional news or exceptional problems. "They found it," came the gravelly voice of his informant, a weasel of a man named Dmitri who worked the docks. "Construction crew tore down the old Henderson place yesterday. One of the workers took something home." Victor's pulse quickened as he swung his legs over the edge of the motel bed. The diamonds. After more than 2 decades of following dead leads and ghost trails across 3 continents, someone had finally stumbled onto Antonov's hidden fortune, the fortune that had cost Victor his position in the organization, his reputation, and nearly his life. "You're certain?" Victor's accent had softened over the years in America, but stress always brought back the harsh consonants of his childhood. "Construction foreman's talking. Says his guy Marcus Webb acted strange all day, then bolted early. Webb's got money troubles, everyone knows it. Kid's desperate enough to take whatever he found." Victor was already reaching for his clothes. A dress. 15 minutes later, he sat in his rental car outside a shabby apartment complex, studying the darkened windows of Unit 2B. The building reeked of desperation. Peeling paint, broken security gate, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked no questions. Perfect for a man trying to disappear, terrible for a man trying to hide a fortune. But Victor wasn't the only hunter in these woods. 3 blocks away, Elena Vasquez adjusted the focus on her binoculars and watched the Russian settle into his surveillance position. She'd been tracking Kozlov for 18 months, ever since her contacts in Interpol flagged his entry into the United States. The man was a ghost, officially dead according to most intelligence agencies, but Elena knew better. She'd been hunting the same prize for nearly as long as he had. Her phone displayed a dossier photo of Marcus Webb, 32, divorced, facing foreclosure, working construction to barely keep his head above water. The kind of ordinary man who could disappear into witness protection with a new identity and a modest settlement, provided he cooperated. Elena preferred that approach, cleaner than Kozlov's methods and infinitely more humane. She speed-dialed her handler. "Target confirmed. Kozlov's here, which means Webb definitely has them. Rules of engagement? Kozlov's a kill-or-be-killed proposition. But I want Webb alive. He's a civilian who got lucky, not a criminal. Understood. Support team is 20 minutes out." Elena ended the call and checked her weapon. 20 minutes might be 19 too many. Inside his apartment, Marcus jolted awake to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Soft, deliberate steps that paused outside his door. He'd been dreaming about the diamonds again. Nightmare visions of faceless men with guns tracking him down. His hand instinctively moved to the duffel bag beside his bed. The footsteps moved on, but sleep was finished for the night. Marcus padded to the window and peered through the blinds. A sedan sat under the broken streetlight, exhaust visible in the cold air. Someone was inside, waiting. His blood ran cold. He grabbed his clothes and the duffel bag, mind racing. Fire escape. He had to reach the fire escape. Victor saw the apartment light flick on and cursed under his breath. Webb was awake, probably spooked. He reached for his door handle, then froze as another vehicle rounded the corner. Black SUV, tinted windows, moving too slowly for the hour. Competition. The SUV parked 2 blocks down, but Victor's trained eye caught the brief glint of surveillance equipment. Government plates, barely visible but unmistakable to someone who'd spent decades evading such attention. FBI, probably, though he couldn't rule out CIA or even international agencies. Everyone wanted Antonov's diamonds. Elena watched through her scope as Kozlov abandoned his vehicle and moved toward the apartment building. Simultaneously, she spotted movement on the fire escape, a figure carrying what looked like a bag, climbing down as quickly as stealth allowed. Webb's rabbiting, she whispered into her radio. East side fire escape. Copy that. Moving to intercept. But Webb was faster than expected. By the time Elena reached ground level, he'd vanished into the maze of alleyways behind the complex. Kozlov was inside the building now, probably discovering an empty apartment and realizing his quarry had escaped. Marcus ran through shadows he'd known since childhood, the duffel bag bouncing against his hip. Every sound made him flinch, a cat knocking over a trash can, the distant rumble of a delivery truck, his own ragged breathing. The diamonds felt heavier with each step, their weight more psychologically crushing than physical. He'd been naive to think he could simply take them and disappear. Whatever these stones represented, whoever had hidden them in that treehouse, they weren't going to give up easily. Marcus was trapped in a game whose rules he didn't understand, holding cards that could either save his life or end it. Behind him, the hunt intensified. Marcus stared at the velvet pouch in his trembling hands, his mind racing through possibilities that all seemed to lead to the same terrifying conclusion. 3 hours had passed since he'd climbed down from that treehouse, and the weight of what he'd discovered pressed down on him like a physical force. He'd driven home in a daze, the pouch hidden beneath his truck's spare tire, checking his rearview mirror every few seconds for cars that might be following him. His small apartment felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew he was harboring something dangerous. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car door slamming in the parking lot, sent his heart hammering against his ribs. The diamonds lay spread across his kitchen table like fallen stars, each one catching the overhead light and throwing it back in brilliant fragments. He'd counted them twice, 47 stones of varying sizes, some no bigger than his pinky nail, others the size of marbles. Even with his limited knowledge of precious stones, Marcus could tell these weren't ordinary gems. They had a clarity and fire that seemed almost supernatural. His laptop sat open beside the diamonds, the browser history already showing a dozen searches about diamond identification, international gem theft, and statute of limitations on stolen property. What he'd learned made his stomach churn. Diamonds this quality, this size, they could be worth millions. And people didn't just lose millions of dollars worth of diamonds in a treehouse and forget about them. The knock at his door came at 9:47 p.m. Marcus froze, his hand halfway to his coffee cup. The knock came again, 3 measured raps that somehow conveyed more authority than politeness. He swept the diamonds back into their pouch, his movements jerky with panic, and shoved it into the kitchen drawer beneath a pile of takeout menus. "Mr. Chen?" The voice was female, professional, with just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "My name is Detective Sarah Walsh. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the construction site where you've been working." Relief flooded through him so suddenly his knees nearly buckled. Police. Just police asking routine questions. He smoothed his hair and opened the door, trying to look like a man whose biggest concern was paying rent, not hiding a fortune in stolen diamonds. Detective Walsh was younger than her voice suggested, maybe early 30s, with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her badge looked legitimate, but something about her stance, too balanced, too ready, reminded him more of a fighter than a cop. "Mr. Chen, I understand you've been working demolition at the Riverside Development Project." "That's right. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "Is there some kind of problem? We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area, people going through the abandoned buildings, possibly looking for something." Her eyes never left his face. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" The lie came easily, fueled by pure survival instinct. "Can't say I have. We mostly stick to the demolition schedule, you know? In and out." Detective Walsh nodded slowly, but her expression suggested she was cataloguing every micro-expression, every tell. "The thing is, Mr. Chen, we have reason to believe someone may have found something they shouldn't have. Something that belongs to some very dangerous people." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the evening chill. "I'm not sure what you mean." 23 years ago, a courier for an international diamond syndicate disappeared with a shipment worth over $200 million. The courier's body was found 6 months later, but the diamonds never surfaced. She paused, letting the number sink in. "Recently, we received intelligence suggesting those diamonds might be hidden somewhere in the area you've been working." The kitchen drawer suddenly felt like it was radiating heat. Marcus gripped the doorframe to keep his hands steady. That's a lot of money. These people, Mr. Chen, they don't forget, and they don't forgive. They've been looking for those diamonds for over 2 decades. If someone were to find them..." She let the sentence hang in the air like a threat. What would happen to that person? Detective Walsh's smile was cold as winter moonlight. "That would depend entirely on how cooperative they were. The syndicate prefers to handle these matters quietly, but they're not known for their patience." She reached into her jacket and produced a business card. "If you remember anything at all, you should call me immediately, for your own safety." Marcus took the card with fingers that barely trembled. The name read Detective S. Walsh, but something about the phone number looked wrong. Too many digits, wrong area code. "I'll definitely keep that in mind." After she left, Marcus stood in his doorway for a long time, watching her card disappear into the night. The business card felt heavier than the diamonds, somehow, weighted with implications he was only beginning to understand. When he finally closed the door, he realized Detective Sarah Walsh might not be a detective at all. Marcus sat in his truck outside the First National Bank of Millfield, the duffel bag heavy on his lap. Through the windshield, he watched morning commuters hurry past, their faces buried in phones, completely unaware that he was holding more wealth than their entire town would see in a century. The diamonds caught the early sunlight filtering through the canvas, throwing tiny rainbows across his calloused palms. Each stone was perfectly cut, museum quality. These weren't the rough industrial diamonds he'd seen on construction sites. These were the kind of gems that graced royal crowns and billionaire collections. His phone buzzed. "Sarah." "Marcus, where are you? Tommy's been asking for you all morning." "Just running an errand, sweetheart. I'll be home soon. The bank called about our mortgage payment. It's 3 days overdue." The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he sat, literally holding a fortune, outside the very bank that was threatening to take his home. "Don't worry about that. I'm handling it." "With what money, Marcus? Your last paycheck barely covered groceries." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her exhaustion through the phone. 3 years of financial struggle had worn them both down to nothing. "Trust me, okay? Everything's going to change." After hanging up, Marcus stared at the bank's glass doors. Walking in there with the diamonds would raise questions he couldn't answer. He needed a plan, and he needed it to be invisible. The public library's computer terminal hummed quietly as Marcus researched diamond appraisals and private buyers. His construction worker hands felt clumsy on the keyboard, but determination drove him forward. According to his searches, legitimate dealers required documentation proving ownership. The black market was different, but dangerous in ways he was only beginning to understand. A news article from 1998 made his blood run cold. International diamond heist nets $200 million from Antwerp vault. The accompanying photos showed stones identical to the ones now hidden in his truck. The article mentioned a sophisticated criminal organization called the Meridian Collective, known for their brutality and long memory. 25 years. These diamonds had been missing for 25 years. Marcus's hands trembled as he printed the article. The thieves had never been caught, and according to follow-up stories, the Meridian Collective had spent decades hunting for their stolen fortune. Bodies had turned up in 3 countries, all connected to the missing diamonds. He was holding stolen property worth more than most people could imagine, and the original thieves were still out there, still looking. The drive home felt eternal. Every car in his rearview mirror looked suspicious. Every pedestrian might be watching him. Marcus pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, studying his modest 2-bedroom house. Peeling paint, a sagging front porch, Sarah's herb garden struggling in the poor soil. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Tommy burst through the front door before Marcus could even get out of the truck. "Dad, look what I built with my Legos!" Marcus forced a smile, ruffling his son's hair. "That's incredible, buddy. Is that a castle?" "It's a fortress. Mom says bad guys can't get in if you build the walls high enough." The innocence in Tommy's voice made Marcus's chest tighten. He glanced at the duffel bag in his truck, then back at his son. "Your mom's a smart lady." Sarah appeared in the doorway, beautiful despite the worry lines that had deepened over the past year. "Everything okay? You look pale." "Just tired." Marcus locked the truck, leaving the diamonds hidden under a tool tarp. "Listen, I might have found a way to solve our money problems." Her expression grew guarded. "What kind of way?" "A legitimate opportunity. I can't explain everything yet, but we might be able to pay off the mortgage and then some." "Marcus, please tell me you're not getting involved in something dangerous." Before he could answer, a black sedan pulled slowly past their house. The driver wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and his gaze lingered on Marcus's property for too long. The car continued down the street, but Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Everything's fine," he lied, pulling Sarah and Tommy inside. "Why don't we make pancakes for lunch?" "My treat." As Sarah bustled around the kitchen and Tommy chattered about his Lego fortress, Marcus stood at the window watching the street. The black sedan was parked 3 blocks down, partially hidden behind a delivery truck. They'd found him. The realization hit like a physical blow. Somehow, impossibly, after 25 years, the Meridian Collective had tracked their diamonds to a small town in nowhere, America. Marcus had no idea how, but the evidence sat outside his house like a promise of violence. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against his better judgment, Marcus answered. "Mr. Chen." The voice was cultured, patient, terrifying. "I believe you have something that belongs to us." The safe deposit box felt impossibly heavy in Marcus's hands as he carried it to the small viewing room. His palms were slick with sweat, and every footstep echoed like a gunshot in the sterile bank corridor. The elderly clerk had barely glanced at the forged identification papers, a stroke of luck that Marcus knew wouldn't last forever. Inside the cramped room, he set the box on the polished table and lifted the lid. The diamonds caught the fluorescent light like captured stars, each stone worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. He'd managed to transfer roughly half the collection from the Treehouse before paranoia drove him to seek this temporary sanctuary. His burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Marcus Chen." The voice was calm, accented. "European, maybe. We need to talk." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "I think you have the wrong number." Construction worker, recently unemployed, lives in a studio apartment on Bleecker Street, drives a 2008 Honda Civic with a dented rear bumper. The man paused. "Should I continue?" The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's trembling fingers. "What do you want?" "What's ours?" "You've stumbled upon something that doesn't belong to you, Mr. Chen. Something my associates and I have been searching for with considerable dedication." Through the viewing room's small window, Marcus watched normal people conducting normal banking business, a mother with her teenage daughter, an elderly man shuffling through paperwork. None of them knew that death was speaking through a cell phone 3 feet away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Kozlov collection. 23 years we've been hunting those stones. They were stolen from us in Prague, along with the life of someone very dear to my employer. The voice hardened. You cannot imagine the resources we've expended, the lives we've taken searching for them. Marcus closed the safe deposit box with shaking hands. Look, I can explain. No explanation necessary. Children playing in an old treehouse, disturbing what should have remained buried. We know about the hiding place now. We know about your midnight visits. We know about the bank you're sitting in right now. The room seemed to shrink around Marcus. His eyes darted to the door, calculating distances, escape routes. You're watching me? Mr. Chen, you have approximately 6 hours to return every stone to the original location. If you've sold any, liquidated any, given any away, you'll replace their value in cash. This is not a negotiation, and if I refuse... The laugh that came through the phone made Marcus's skin crawl. 3 days ago, a fence in Detroit thought he could move some diamonds that matched our description. We found pieces of him in 4 different zip codes. Marcus swallowed hard. 6 hours isn't enough time to... Then I suggest you work efficiently. The line went dead. For several minutes, Marcus sat frozen in the viewing room chair. 23 years. These people had been hunting the diamonds since before he'd graduated high school. They'd killed for them, would kill again. The construction worker who'd stumbled upon a fortune had just learned he'd actually stumbled into a grave. But as the initial terror subsided, something else crept in. Anger. His entire adult life had been a series of compromises, setbacks, and defeats. The diamonds represented the first real opportunity he'd ever had to change his circumstances, to matter, to be more than just another expendable laborer counting down the days until his body gave out. Marcus opened the safe deposit box again. The stones seemed to pulse with their own inner light, each facet reflecting not just illumination but possibility, freedom, power, a life worth living. He began transferring diamonds into his jacket pockets, moving with careful precision. If these people wanted their stones back, they'd have to take them from him. But he wouldn't make it easy. The bank's security cameras tracked his movement as he left the viewing room, but Marcus had studied the layout during his previous visits. 3 exits, multiple blind spots, and a parking garage that connected to the subway system. He handed the empty safe deposit box back to the clerk with a steady smile. "Will you be needing access again soon, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, using the false name on his forged documents. "Very soon," Marcus replied. "Probably tonight." Outside, he forced himself to walk casually down the street, resisting the urge to run. Every parked car could contain watchers. Every pedestrian might be a killer. But the weight of the diamonds in his pockets grounded him, reminded him of what was at stake. 6 hours. They'd given him 6 hours to surrender the only hope he'd ever had. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never called. "Tony? It's Marcus. Remember that favor you said you owed me? I need to collect, tonight, and bring everything you've got." The war for the Kozlov collection was about to begin. The abandoned warehouse squatted like a concrete beast against the grey Detroit skyline, its broken windows staring blindly at the street below. Marcus pulled his truck behind a rusted dumpster, hands trembling as he cut the engine. 3 days had passed since he'd found the diamonds, and sleep had become a stranger. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound carried threat. He'd spent those 72 hours researching, trying to understand what he'd stumbled into. The serial numbers on some of the stones had led him down a digital rabbit hole that ended in newspaper archives from 1998. A heist in Antwerp, 2 guards dead, a crime family called the Kozlovs, implicated but never charged. The diamonds had vanished without a trace, along with the thieves who'd stolen them, until now. Marcus climbed out of the truck, the duffel bag heavy in his sweating palm. Inside, wrapped in his daughter's old baby blanket, lay roughly $10 million worth of stones. He'd counted them obsessively, memorizing every facet, every flaw. The rest remained hidden in a safety deposit box across town, insurance against whatever was about to happen. The warehouse door hung open like a broken jaw. Marcus had chosen this place carefully. Multiple exits, clear sightlines, and most importantly, no security cameras. If this went sideways, he wanted options. You came alone. Smart. The voice emerged from the shadows before its owner did. Viktor Kozlov stepped into the dim light filtering through the broken ceiling, his expensive suit incongruous in the industrial decay. Behind him, two men flanked the entrance, their hands resting casually inside their jackets. "You're not what I expected," Viktor continued, circling Marcus like a predator sizing up prey. "Construction worker divorced, behind on child support. Desperate men make foolish choices." "I just want this to end," Marcus said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I have some of your stones. We can make a deal." Victor's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "A deal? You think this is a negotiation?" He gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet displaying surveillance footage. Marcus watched himself climbing down from the treehouse, duffel bag in hand. "We've been watching you for 2 days, Mr. Hayes. We know about the safety deposit box. We know about your pathetic attempt to research our family history. What we don't know is why you're still breathing." The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, the crushing realization that he'd been playing chess while his opponents wielded machine guns. "Because you need me," Marcus said, the words tumbling out before his fear could stop them. "The stones aren't all in one place. Kill me, and you'll spend another 20 years searching." Victor's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we'll simply visit your ex-wife, your daughter, 8 years old, isn't she? Attends Roosevelt Elementary." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Leave them out of this." "That depends entirely on your cooperation." Victor snapped his fingers and one of his men stepped forward. "My associate here will accompany you to retrieve the remaining stones, all of them. Any tricks, any heroics, and your family pays the price." Marcus's mind raced, calculating odds, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The duffel bag felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as he set it on the concrete floor. Victor nodded to his other man, who unzipped it and examined the contents. "This is perhaps 5% of what was stolen," Victor said after a moment. "Where are the rest?" "Safety deposit box. First National Downtown Branch." "Good. We'll collect them now." Victor checked his watch, a gesture so casual it was almost insulting. "The bank closes in 2 hours. Plenty of time for a withdrawal." As they moved toward the exit, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Through one of the broken windows, he spotted movement on a nearby rooftop, a flash of sunlight on metal that could only be a rifle scope. "You might want to reconsider," Marcus said quietly. Victor paused. "Excuse me?" "Check the rooftops. 3rd building south. Unless I'm mistaken, someone else is interested in our little transaction." The crime boss's eyes narrowed as he followed Marcus's gaze. After a moment, he saw it too, the barely visible outline of a sniper's position. His men immediately drew their weapons, scanning the surrounding buildings. "It seems we have company," Victor murmured. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes, who else knows about the diamonds?" "Nobody, I swear." "Then we have a problem." Victor's phone buzzed, and he answered it with clipped Russian phrases that Marcus couldn't understand, but recognized as profanity. When he hung up, his face was stone. "It appears the Belgians have finally tracked down their missing property. This changes everything." The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. Marcus realized he wasn't caught between a rock and a hard place. He was trapped in the middle of a war that had been brewing for 20 years, and he was about to become its first casualty. The burner phone's shrill ring cut through the pre-dawn silence like a knife. Marcus jolted awake on the motel room's lumpy mattress, his hand instinctively reaching for the duffel bag beside him before answering. "You have something that belongs to us." The voice was cold, precise, with a faint European accent that made Marcus's blood freeze. "I don't know what you're talking about." His mouth was dry as sandpaper. A low chuckle. "Marcus Chen, age 34, currently unemployed construction worker, lives at 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Your landlord, Mrs. Rodriguez, makes excellent tamales, doesn't she?" Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. They knew everything. "We also know about your sick daughter. Leukemia is expensive to treat, even with insurance. Medical bills can bankrupt a family. Don't you dare—" "Relax, Mr. Chen. We're not monsters. In fact, we're prepared to be quite generous. The stones you found have sentimental value to us. Return them, and we'll pay you handsomely for your trouble. $5 million. Cash." Marcus stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. $5 million would cover Emma's treatment for life, with enough left over to never worry about money again. But something in the man's tone suggested this wasn't really a negotiation. "And if I refuse, then you'll discover that some treasures come with a price too steep to pay. You have 24 hours. We'll call with instructions." The line went dead. Marcus threw on his clothes and grabbed the duffel bag. The diamonds clinked softly inside, their weight both promise and curse. He needed help, but Detective Morrison had made it clear the police couldn't protect him indefinitely. And now these people knew about Emma. He drove through the empty streets, taking random turns to ensure he wasn't followed. The city looked different in the grey morning light, hostile, full of shadows where enemies might lurk. Every car behind him could be a threat, every pedestrian a potential spy. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Emma asking for you. Doctors want to start next treatment phase Monday. Need to discuss costs." Monday was 3 days away. The timing felt like another twist of the knife. Marcus pulled into a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. Inside, he ordered coffee and tried to think clearly. The smart play was obvious: take the $5 million and walk away. But something nagged at him. If these diamonds were just sentimentally valuable, why offer such an enormous sum? Why hunt for them across 2 decades? He pulled out his laptop and searched for information about major diamond heists. Most of the articles were about recent crimes, but eventually he found something that made his blood run cold. A story from 23 years ago about a massive theft from a diamond exchange in Antwerp. The thieves had made off with over 200 million in uncut stones, disappearing without a trace. The theft had been orchestrated by the Kozlov Syndicate, a Russian crime organization known for its brutality and long memory. According to the article, Dmitry Kozlov himself had sworn to recover the stones no matter how long it took. Marcus's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as he set it down. These weren't just any diamonds. They were the centerpiece of one of the largest unsolved heists in history. And now he was holding them. His phone rang again. Different number this time. "Mr. Chen?" A woman's voice, younger but no less dangerous. "My name is Anya Kozlov. I believe my associate made you an offer." "Kozlov," Marcus repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "I see you've done your research. Good. Then you understand the gravity of your situation. My family has been searching for those stones for 23 years. We've killed for less. You said 5 million. That offer has expired. My grandfather believes in generous first offers and swift consequences for those who hesitate. You now have 12 hours, and the price is 2 million. Wait, that's not fair." "Fair?" Anya's laugh was ice cold. "Was it fair when those stones were stolen from us? When our associates died protecting them? When we've spent decades hunting the thieves who thought they could disappear into your quaint American countryside?" Marcus felt the walls closing in. "What guarantee do I have that you'll let me live?" "None. But I guarantee what will happen if you don't comply. We know where your daughter receives treatment, Mr. Chen. We know her room number, her doctor's names, her medication schedule. The threat hung in the air like poison gas." 12 hours, Anya continued. "And Marcus, don't think about running. We've had practice finding people who thought they could hide from us. It never ends well." The line went dead, leaving Marcus alone with his coffee and the weight of 23 years of violence bearing down on him like an avalanche. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Rusted metal siding hung in sheets and weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete foundation. Jake pulled his truck behind a collapsed chain-link fence, his heart hammering against his ribs. The duffel bag full of diamonds sat in the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. He'd driven for 3 hours after leaving Sarah's apartment, his mind racing through possibilities. Every police siren, every car that followed too closely, every shadow that moved wrong sent adrenaline coursing through his system. The syndicate had found him once, they'd find him again. But first, he needed answers about what he'd stumbled into. The name Victor Kozlov had haunted him since Sarah mentioned it. A quick internet search at a gas station had revealed fragments of a story that made his blood run cold. A diamond heist in Antwerp, Belgium, 23 years ago. An inside job that had gone sideways when one of the crew disappeared with the merchandise. Interpol had never recovered the stones, and the case had gone cold after the other thieves turned up dead one by one. Now Jake understood why men were willing to kill for what he'd found. These weren't just valuable diamonds. They were the holy grail of unsolved crimes. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "We know where you are, Jake." The voice was different this time, heavily accented, possibly Russian. "You cannot hide forever." "What do you want?" Jake kept his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. "You know what we want. Our property. The stones that belong to us. They belong to whoever you stole them from first." A low chuckle echoed through the phone. Such moral clarity from a man who took what wasn't his. "We are not so different, you and I." Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm nothing like you." "Perhaps, but you will give us what we seek, or others will pay the price. Your friend Marcus, for instance, lives on Maple Street with his wife and 2 young daughters. Beautiful family." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "Leave them alone. They don't know anything about this. Then make this simple. Pier 47, midnight. Come alone, bring our diamonds, and no one else suffers." The line went dead. Jake stared at the phone, his hands shaking. These people had done their homework. They knew about Marcus, probably knew about Sarah too. Every person he cared about was now a target because of his discovery. He climbed out of the truck and grabbed the duffel bag. The warehouse's main door hung askew on broken hinges. Inside, shafts of late-afternoon sunlight cut through holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. The air smelled of rust and decay. Jake found a relatively clean corner and sat down with the bag. He unzipped it and stared at the fortune that had become his curse. The diamonds caught the light, throwing rainbow fragments across the concrete walls, beautiful and deadly. His phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus. "Jake, where the hell are you?" Some guys came by the site asking questions, big guys in expensive suits. They didn't look like building inspectors. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. Take Linda and the girls and go somewhere safe. Tonight. Don't go home." "What?" "Jake, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything, but I'm in trouble. Bad trouble. These people might try to get to me through you and your family." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice tight. "This is about that treehouse, isn't it? What did you find up there?" Jake closed his eyes. Something that should have stayed buried. "Just trust me, okay? Get your family somewhere safe and stay there until you hear from me. And what if I don't hear from you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake didn't have a good answer. After ending the call, he sat in the growing shadows of the warehouse, weighing his options. He could go to the meeting at Pier 47, hand over the diamonds, and hope the syndicate would leave him alone. But men who had spent 23 years hunting for these stones weren't likely to let the only witness walk away. He could run, disappear with the diamonds and start over somewhere far away, but they'd already proven they could find him, and they'd use his friends to draw him back. Or he could fight. The thought seemed absurd, a construction worker against an international crime syndicate. But maybe he didn't have to face them alone. Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number Detective Mills had given him. His finger hovered over the call button. Once he made this choice, There would be no going back. The warehouse creaked around him as wind picked up outside. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Jake pressed the button and waited for Mills to answer, knowing that everything was about to change. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town looked like every other derelict building Marcus had worked on demolition crews for, but stepping inside felt like entering a tomb. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight that pierced through broken windows, and the smell of rust and decay hung thick in the air. Elena moved beside him with practiced silence, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. "They'll come from multiple angles," she whispered, checking her weapon. "Kozlov never sends fewer than 6 men for something this important." Marcus gripped the duffel bag containing a fraction of the diamonds, enough to make the trade look legitimate, but not so many that he'd lose everything if this went sideways. His palms were slick with sweat despite the cool morning air filtering through the broken roof. "Remember," Elena continued, "when I give the signal, you run for the east exit. Don't look back, don't wait for me. Get to the car and drive. I'm not leaving you here." She turned to face him, her expression hard. "This isn't up for debate. If something happens to me, those diamonds are the only thing keeping you alive long enough to disappear." The sound of approaching vehicles cut through their conversation. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as black SUVs pulled up outside. Car doors slammed with military precision, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. "Showtime," Elena muttered. Viktor Kozlov entered first, his silver hair gleaming despite the dim lighting. He wore an expensive suit that seemed absurdly formal for a warehouse meeting, but Marcus had learned that men like Kozlov used clothing as armor, a way to project power even in the most squalid surroundings. 4 armed men flanked him, their eyes sweeping the space with professional paranoia. "Mr. Chen," Kozlov's voice echoed off the concrete walls, "I trust you've reconsidered our previous conversation." Marcus stepped forward, the bag heavy in his hand. "I want this to end. Take your diamonds and leave me alone." Kozlov smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple anymore. You see, you've caused me considerable inconvenience. My associates in Moscow are asking uncomfortable questions about a fortune that should have been recovered years ago. That's not my problem." "Oh, but it is." Kozlov gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet computer. "We know about your friend Elena, former FSB wanted for the theft of classified documents. Very resourceful woman, but she's made enemies in high places." Marcus felt Elena tense beside him. The tablet screen showed surveillance photos of her entering various buildings over the past few days. They'd been watched, tracked like animals. "Here's what's going to happen," Kozlov continued. "You're going to give me all the diamonds, not just this pathetic sample I'm sure you've brought, and then you're both coming with me. My employers have questions that need answering." "We don't know where the rest are," Marcus lied. "I only managed to grab these before the treehouse burned down." Kozlov laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Please, do you think I'm an amateur? We've had thermal imaging satellites tracking that area for weeks. The fire was started after you'd already removed everything of value." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Marcus could hear his own breathing, unnaturally loud in the cavernous space. Elena's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her weapon. "You have 10 seconds to produce the location of my property," Kozlov said, "or I start shooting pieces off your construction worker friend until you remember where you put them." Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "The diamonds aren't here." "I assumed as much. But neither are we." The world exploded into chaos. Elena dove left, drawing her weapon as smoke grenades she'd planted earlier erupted around the warehouse's perimeter. Marcus hit the ground as gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes strobing through the artificial fog like deadly fireworks. "East exit!" Elena shouted over the noise. Marcus crawled toward where he hoped the door was, dragging the duffel bag and trying to stay below the worst of the gunfire. Bullets whined off concrete and metal around him. Through the smoke he could see shadows moving. Kozlov's men trying to establish firing positions while Elena's diversions turned their careful ambush into a confused melee. A hand grabbed his shoulder, and Marcus nearly screamed before realizing it was Elena. Blood ran from a cut above her eye, but she was moving with deadly purpose. "They've got the exits covered," she gasped. "We need to go up." She pointed toward a maintenance ladder leading to the warehouse's upper level. More gunfire erupted behind them as Kozlov barked orders in Russian. The smoke was beginning to clear, which meant their cover wouldn't last much longer. They climbed desperately, Marcus's muscles screaming from the effort. Below them, flashlight beams began cutting through the haze like searchlights hunting for prey. The safe house sat like a forgotten relic among the pine trees, its weathered boards and sagging porch telling stories of decades past. Marcus clutched the duffel bag tighter as they approached, every shadow between the trees making his heart race. Elena moved ahead with practiced silence, her eyes scanning for threats that Marcus wouldn't even know to look for. "Inside, quickly," she whispered, producing a key from beneath a loose board. The door opened with a groan that seemed to echo through the forest. The interior smelled of dust and old wood, but it was clean and surprisingly well maintained. Elena immediately went to the windows, checking sight lines and escape routes with military precision. Marcus set the bag down and finally allowed himself to breathe. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked, watching her examine the locks on the back door. 23 years, she said without turning around. "Ever since I realized what my father had done, what he'd stolen from those people." Marcus studied her profile in the dim light filtering through the curtains. There was something she wasn't telling him, something that went deeper than simple guilt over her father's crimes. "What aren't you saying?" Elena's hands stilled on the door handle. For a long moment, the only sound was whined through the pine boughs outside. Then she turned to face him, and Marcus saw something vulnerable in her expression that she'd been carefully hiding. "My father didn't work alone," she said quietly. "He had a partner. Someone inside the Kozlov organization who helped him plan the heist, who provided the security codes and timing." She paused, her jaw tightening. "Someone who was supposed to split the diamonds with him 50-50. The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind with horrible clarity. "But your father kept them all. He got greedy. Decided he didn't need a partner after all." Elena walked to the small kitchen and pulled out 2 bottles of water from a cabinet. "The partner has been hunting for those diamonds ever since, climbing the ranks of the organization, gaining power, waiting for his chance at revenge." "Who is he?" "Viktor Petrov, Kozlov's current right-hand man and heir apparent." She handed Marcus a water bottle, their fingers brushing briefly. "He's the one orchestrating this entire hunt. It's not just about the money for him anymore, it's personal." Marcus felt the weight of that revelation settle over him like a lead blanket. They weren't just running from a crime syndicate, they were running from a man with 23 years of rage driving him forward. "There's more," Elena continued. "Petrov knows about me, has always known. He's been watching, waiting to see if I'd lead him to the diamonds. My father made sure I stayed hidden, but after he died," she shrugged helplessly, "I became the only link to his secret. So, coming to warn me, exposed me completely." "Yes." Elena sat heavily in an old armchair, exhaustion finally showing in her posture. "I knew it would, but I couldn't let you walk into this blind." Marcus stared at her, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd sacrificed. She'd blown her cover, abandoned her safety, put herself in mortal danger, all to save a stranger who'd stumbled into a nightmare. "Why?" he asked. "You could have just disappeared, started over somewhere else. Why risk everything for someone you don't even know?" Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I've spent my entire adult life running from my father's sins, living in the shadows, always looking over my shoulder, never able to have a normal life or form real connections with anyone." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. When I saw you with those diamonds, saw the terror in your eyes when you realized what you'd found, I saw myself 20 years ago, and I couldn't let you go through what I've been through, not alone." The silence stretched between them, heavy with emotion and the weight of their shared predicament. Outside, a branch cracked, making them both freeze. Elena was on her feet instantly, moving to the window with fluid grace. "Just a deer," she reported after a tense moment. "But we can't stay here long. Petrov's people are good, and they're motivated. We have maybe 6 hours before they track us down." Marcus nodded, understanding that their brief respite was almost over. He looked at the duffel bag full of cursed diamonds, then at Elena's determined profile as she continued her surveillance. 6 hours to figure out how to end a 23-year-old vendetta. 6 hours to find a way to survive against impossible odds. 6 hours to somehow turn the tables on one of the most dangerous men in the criminal underworld. Marcus picked up the bag and felt its weight, not just the physical heaviness of the stones, but the crushing burden of all the blood, betrayal, and broken lives they represented. It was time to make a plan. The rain hammered against the warehouse windows as Marcus crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, his heart pounding so hard he was certain Petrov's men could hear it from across the cavernous space. The diamonds felt impossibly heavy in the backpack pressed against his spine, their weight seeming to grow with each passing second. Through the gaps between containers, he could see 3 figures moving methodically through the maze of cargo, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like deadly searchlights. Petrov's voice echoed off the metal walls, cold and patient. "Mr. Chen, there's nowhere left to run. You've led us quite a chase, but this ends tonight. Return what belongs to us, and perhaps we can discuss terms." Marcus pressed himself deeper into the shadows, his fingers finding the burner phone Detective Rivera had given him before everything went sideways. No signal. The warehouse's metal construction was blocking everything. He was truly alone. A beam of light swept dangerously close to his position. Marcus held his breath as footsteps approached, the sound of boots on concrete growing louder. Through a crack in the containers, he glimpsed the scarred face of Kozlov, Petrov's lieutenant, scanning the area with predatory focus. The plan had seemed solid when Rivera outlined it 6 hours ago. Use Marcus as bait to draw out the syndicate while FBI agents closed the net. But the operation had gone wrong from the start. Someone had tipped off Petrov's crew, and the FBI team walking into the initial meeting point had found only explosives and a mocking note. Now Marcus was improvising, running on pure survival instinct through the industrial district's labyrinth of abandoned buildings. The warehouse had seemed like salvation when he'd spotted the broken window 30 feet up a fire escape ladder. He'd climbed in darkness, thinking he could wait out the search or find another way down. Instead, he'd trapped himself. "You know," Petrov's voice drifted closer, conversational now, "those diamonds have quite a history. 23 years ago, they were liberated from a corrupt Russian general who thought he could steal from us. The man who took them from the general was clever. He hid them so well that we spent over 2 decades searching." Marcus shifted position as quietly as possible, trying to work his way toward the back of the warehouse. His construction boots felt impossibly loud against the concrete floor. "That man died in a car accident before he could retrieve them," Petrov continued, "but not before telling his young son where they were hidden. A son who built tree houses for wealthy families. A son who had a gambling problem and eventually sold that information to pay his debts." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind with sickening clarity. Tommy hadn't built the treehouse as some innocent childhood project. His father had been a thief, and Tommy had inherited knowledge worth more than most people's lives. No wonder the kid had seemed so nervous, so desperate to sell the location cheap. A metallic clang echoed through the warehouse as someone knocked over a piece of equipment. The sound came from the opposite direction, and Marcus realized with growing dread that they were surrounding him. The beautiful irony, Petrov's voice was closer now, maybe 50 feet away, is that you've done exactly what young Tommy was supposed to do 20 years ago. You found our property and brought it exactly where we needed it to be." Marcus reached the back wall and began feeling along it desperately. His fingers found a service ladder leading up to a maintenance platform near the ceiling. Without hesitation, he began climbing, the backpack's straps cutting into his shoulders with each rung. The difference is that Tommy's debt gave him certain protections. You, Mr. Chen, are simply an inconvenience to be eliminated. The platform was narrow, barely 3 feet wide, but it ran the length of the warehouse. Marcus could see skylights ahead, potential escape routes if he could figure out how to reach them. More importantly, from this height he could see the positions of all 3 searchers. They'd been herding him toward the back wall intentionally. A spotlight suddenly blazed to life below, and Kozlov's scarred face turned upward with a triumphant smile. Found him. Marcus ran. The metal platform clanged and swayed under his weight, but he pushed forward as shouts erupted below. A gunshot rang out, sparking off the railing inches from his hand. Another shot shattered a window somewhere in the darkness. Ahead, one of the skylights was cracked, its glass spider-webbed from weather damage. Marcus didn't slow down. He launched himself upward, bursting through the weakened glass in an explosion of fragments, the backpack protecting his spine from the worst of it. He hit the warehouse roof hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Rain immediately soaked through his clothes, making the metal surface treacherous. Behind him, angry voices were shouting orders, coordinating pursuit routes. Marcus looked out over the industrial district's rooftops, calculating distances and angles like he would on any construction site. 3 buildings over, he could see the glow of a 24-hour truck stop. Time to see if all those years of high-steel work had prepared him for this. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, its cavernous interior lit only by shafts of moonlight streaming through broken skylights. Marcus pressed his back against a concrete pillar, clutching the duffel bag containing the diamonds, while his heart hammered against his ribs. Elena crouched beside him, her pistol drawn, listening for any sign of movement in the maze of abandoned machinery around them. "This was supposed to be safe," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of traffic from the highway. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cool night air. "Nothing's been safe since I found those damn stones." He peered around the pillar, scanning the shadows between rusted conveyor belts and towering metal scaffolding. "How did they find us so fast?" Before Elena could answer, the sharp crack of footsteps echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Then another set, moving in perfect synchronization. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Kozlov syndicate had sent their best. There, Elena pointed to a maintenance ladder leading to a catwalk 30 feet above the warehouse floor. "We get up there, we might have a chance to slip out through the roof access." They moved silently through the industrial graveyard, weaving between defunct machines and stacks of rotting wooden pallets. The duffel bag felt heavier with each step, its contents worth more than Marcus could comprehend, yet currently feeling like the world's most expensive anchor, dragging him towards certain death. A metallic clang resonated from somewhere behind them, followed by muffled voices speaking in what sounded like Russian. Marcus's grip tightened on the bag's handles. He thought of his daughter, Sarah, probably asleep in her dorm room 3 states away, blissfully unaware that her father had stumbled into a nightmare that began decades before she was born. They reached the base of the ladder. Elena holstered her weapon and started climbing, her movements fluid and practiced. Marcus followed, the duffel bag slung awkwardly across his shoulder, trying not to think about the 30-foot drop to the concrete below. Each rung seemed to groan under their weight, the sound amplified in the warehouse's cathedral-like space. Halfway up, a powerful flashlight beam swept across the warehouse floor beneath them. Marcus froze, watching the circle of white light dance over the spot where they'd been standing moments before. The beam lingered, then began moving in a systematic search pattern. Elena had reached the catwalk and was gesturing frantically for him to hurry. Marcus forced himself to continue climbing, his construction worker calluses the only thing preventing his sweaty palms from slipping off the metal rungs. The flashlight beam swept closer, its edge now illuminating the bottom of the ladder. He hauled himself onto the catwalk just as voices erupted from below. They'd been spotted. "Move!" Elena hissed, already sprinting along the narrow metal walkway toward the far end of the warehouse. Marcus followed, the catwalk swaying slightly under their combined weight. Behind them, he could hear multiple sets of boots on the ladder rungs climbing fast. The roof access was a small door set into the warehouse's slanted ceiling. Elena reached it first, pushing against the handle. It didn't budge. "Locked," she said, then immediately drew her pistol and fired twice at the mechanism. The gunshots boomed through the warehouse like thunder. She kicked the door and it swung open, revealing a patch of star-filled sky. Marcus didn't need encouragement. He scrambled through the opening onto the warehouse's corrugated metal roof, Elena close behind. The surface was slick with dew and angled sharply toward the building's edge. In the distance, he could see the lights of the highway where Elena had stashed her motorcycle. "There's a fire escape on the north side," Elena said, pointing toward the back of the building. They began moving carefully across the roof, trying to maintain their footing on the treacherous surface while staying low to avoid being silhouetted against the night sky. A head appeared through the roof access behind them, followed by the distinctive profile of an assault rifle. Marcus and Elena broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed as automatic gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets sparked off the metal roofing, the sound like deadly rain. They reached the building's edge and found the fire escape, a rusted metal structure that looked like it hadn't been maintained since the warehouse was abandoned. Elena went first, testing each step before committing her full weight. Marcus followed, the duffel bag bouncing against his back with each downward movement. More gunfire from above, but the angle was wrong now, the shots going wide. They reached the ground and ran toward the tree line that bordered the warehouse property. Elena's motorcycle was hidden among the pines, a sleek black machine that represented their only hope of escape. As they reached the bike, Marcus looked back at the warehouse. Dark figures were rappelling down the building's side, moving with military precision. The Kozlov syndicate hadn't spent 20 years hunting these diamonds only to give up now. Elena kicked the motorcycle to life. "Get on!" she shouted over the engine noise, "and hold tight to those stones." Marcus climbed aboard, still clutching the fortune that had turned his life into a waking nightmare, wondering if they could outrun a past that refused to stay buried. The warehouse smelled like rust and decay, its broken windows casting jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Marcus pressed his back against a shipping container, the duffel bag of diamonds cutting into his shoulder, as he listened for any sound of pursuit. His breathing came in short bursts, each exhale visible in the cold morning air. Elena crouched beside him, her dark eyes scanning the maze of abandoned equipment that filled the cavernous space. "They'll be here soon," she whispered, checking the clip of her pistol. "Kozlov doesn't give up easily." Marcus had learned that the hard way. 3 days of running, 3 days of barely staying ahead of the Russians' men, and still they kept coming. The construction worker, who'd stumbled upon a fortune, had become something else entirely. A man marked for death who refused to die quietly. There, Elena pointed to a service ladder bolted to the far wall. "Fire escape to the roof. We can—" The warehouse doors exploded inward with a metallic shriek. 4 men in tactical gear poured through the opening, their weapons raised and ready. Marcus caught a glimpse of Kozlov's scarred face behind them, his expression cold as winter steel. "Run!" Elena hissed, and they broke from cover. Gunshots erupted behind them, bullets sparking off metal and concrete as they weaved between the industrial debris. Marcus's boots slipped on the oil-stained floor, but he kept moving, the bag bouncing against his hip with each stride. They reached the ladder as shouts echoed through the warehouse. Elena went first, her movements quick and practiced. Marcus followed, his calloused hands gripping the rungs as more shots rang out below. A bullet pinged off the metal inches from his head. The roof offered little comfort, just an expanse of tar paper and ventilation units under a grey sky. Elena was already moving toward the edge, where a narrow gap separated them from the next building. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus muttered, seeing the 10-foot chasm between rooftops. "It's either jump or let Kozlov turn you into hamburger," Elena replied, backing up for a running start. Behind them, boots clanged on the ladder. Their pursuers had reached the roof. Elena sprinted forward and leaped, her body arcing gracefully through the air before landing hard on the opposite building. She rolled with the impact and came up running. "Come on!" Marcus heard voices behind him, getting closer. He took a deep breath, gripped the bag tightly and ran. The edge of the roof rushed toward him, and for a terrifying moment he was airborne, the alley yawning beneath his feet like an open grave. His boots hit the neighboring rooftop with jarring force, sending shock waves up his legs. He stumbled forward but kept his footing, Elena already pulling him toward another fire escape. They descended into a narrow alley that reeked of garbage and broken dreams. Elena led them through a maze of back streets, checking corners before they moved, always listening for the sound of pursuit. "The docks," she said, as they caught their breath behind a dumpster. "I have a boat waiting. We can reach the Port Authority building from the water. Detective Morrison should have backup there by now." Marcus nodded, though part of him wondered if they'd live long enough to see Morrison again. The detective had been trying to coordinate with federal authorities, but the wheels of justice moved slowly, while Kozlov's men moved like predators. They emerged from the alley into a street lined with shuttered shops and abandoned cars. The harbor was visible in the distance, its waters grey and choppy under the overcast sky. They were perhaps half a mile away when the black sedan rounded the corner behind them. "Move!" Elena shouted. They ran down the center of the street as the car accelerated toward them. Marcus could see the passenger window sliding down, a gun barrel emerging from the opening. He yanked Elena sideways just as muzzle flashes lit up the interior of the sedan. The bullets shattered storefront windows and chewed chunks from the asphalt. They dove behind a parked delivery truck as the sedan roared past, already beginning a U-turn for another pass. "This way," Elena gasped, leading them between two buildings into another alley. They were close now. Marcus could smell the salt air and hear the cry of seagulls. But as they reached the mouth of the alley, two more men stepped into view, blocking their path to the waterfront. Elena raised her pistol but hesitated when she realized they were outgunned. Behind them, the black sedan's engine grew louder, and Marcus knew they had seconds before being caught in a crossfire. That's when he saw the storm drain grating at his feet, partially hidden beneath years of accumulated trash and debris. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees and began pulling at the metal cover. "Help me," he grunted. Elena understood immediately, holstering her weapon to grab the opposite edge of the grating. Together they lifted it just enough to squeeze through as footsteps pounded toward them from both directions. The warehouse smelled of rust and decay, its broken windows letting in shafts of pale morning light that cut through the dusty air like knife blades. Marcus crouched behind a stack of rotting wooden crates, the duffel bag of diamonds pressed against his chest, his heart hammering so hard he was sure it would give away his position. 20 feet away, Viktor Kozlov stood with his back turned, barking orders into his satellite phone in rapid Russian. 3 other men flanked the exits, their weapons drawn but lowered. They thought they had him cornered, and maybe they did. "The American is here somewhere," Victor said, switching to English. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "He cannot have gone far with such a heavy burden." Marcus closed his eyes and forced himself to think. Sarah was supposed to be setting up the diversion on the south side of the building in exactly 4 minutes. Detective Rodriguez should be coordinating backup somewhere outside, though Marcus had no idea if the cop would actually follow through or if this was all an elaborate trap. A rat scurried across his boot, and he barely suppressed a flinch. The diamonds shifted in the bag with a soft whisper that seemed deafening in the tense silence. "Perhaps we should discuss this rationally," Marcus called out, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. "You want your diamonds back. I want to stay alive. Seems like we might find some middle ground." Victor's laugh was cold and humorless. "Middle ground. You have stolen from us. You have killed 3 of my men. You have cost me more money than your pathetic life is worth." "I didn't steal anything," Marcus said, shifting position as quietly as possible. "I found them in a treehouse. Your beef is with whoever took them in the first place. Antonio Reyes is dead, has been for 5 years. You are all that remains of this problem." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Antonio Reyes, the man whose skeleton they'd found in the treehouse, the original thief who had somehow managed to hide the diamonds for 2 decades before dying with his secret. "So you know about Reyes," Victor continued, his footsteps beginning to echo as he moved closer. "Good. Then you understand this has gone on long enough. The Kozlov family has been patient. We have searched. We have waited. We have killed many people in pursuit of our property. But patience has limits." Marcus heard the distinctive click of a safety being released. He looked around desperately, spotting a rusted fire escape ladder 20 feet to his left. If he could make it there and climb to the second level, he might have a chance to circle around toward the north exit where Sarah would be waiting. "The diamonds aren't even yours," Marcus said, playing for time. "They were stolen from some museum in Prague, right? Blood diamonds from Africa before that. How many people died mining those stones? How many more died when you trafficked them?" "Philosophy from a construction worker," Victor said. "How refreshing, but irrelevant." The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus could see Victor's shadow stretching across the floor, growing larger as the man approached his hiding spot. In 10 seconds, maybe 15, he would be exposed. He took a deep breath, clutched the bag tighter, and sprinted for the ladder. Gunfire erupted immediately, bullets sparking off concrete and sending chunks of debris flying. Marcus dove and rolled, feeling the sharp sting of concrete dust in his eyes. His shoulder hit the bottom rung of the ladder hard enough to make his arm go numb, but adrenaline carried him upward. "There! Second level!" Victor's voice boomed. "Cut him off!" Marcus hauled himself onto the metal grating of a catwalk that ran along the warehouse's upper level. Below him, Victor's men were spreading out, trying to get angles on his position. The whole structure groaned under his weight, rust flakes raining down like snow. He ran along the catwalk toward the far end of the building, the diamonds bouncing against his back with each step. Behind him he could hear someone else climbing the ladder, boots ringing against metal rungs. That's when the explosion hit. The south wall of the warehouse erupted in a ball of orange flame and black smoke. The shockwave knocked Marcus to his knees as debris and glass showered down from above. Car alarms started wailing outside, and through the ringing in his ears he could hear Victor shouting orders. Sarah had outdone herself with the diversion. In the chaos and confusion, Marcus spotted his chance. A loading dock door on the north side stood partially open, and the men who had been guarding it were now running toward the explosion. He climbed over the catwalk railing and dropped down onto a pile of old furniture, rolling to absorb the impact. The duffel bag split open on landing, diamonds scattering across the concrete floor like deadly hail. Marcus scrambled to gather as many as he could, stuffing them into his jacket pockets, knowing he was leaving a fortune behind but having no choice. Victor appeared through the smoke, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his eyes wild with rage. "Run all you want," he snarled, raising his weapon. "This ends today." The warehouse erupted in chaos as Marcus dove behind a stack of shipping containers, bullets sparking off steel around him. The diamonds in his backpack felt heavier than ever, their weight a constant reminder of what had brought him to this moment. Elena's betrayal still stung, but he couldn't afford to think about that now. Volkov's voice boomed across the cavernous space. "You cannot run forever, Mr. Chen. Those diamonds belong to me." Marcus checked his stolen pistol. 3 rounds left. Not nearly enough against Volkov's army of mercenaries. He could hear their boots on concrete, spreading out to flank him. The warehouse's exit seemed impossibly far away, blocked by at least 6 armed men. A metallic clang echoed from above. Marcus looked up to see Detective Sarah Morrison rappelling through a skylight, her tactical team following close behind. Relief flooded through him until he realized the syndicate had spotted them too. "Police!" Morrison shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "Drop your weapons!" Volkov's laugh was cold and bitter. "How convenient. Now I can eliminate all my problems at once." The warehouse exploded into a three-way firefight. Morrison's team had superior training, but Volkov's men had superior numbers and positioning. Marcus found himself caught in the crossfire, bullets whining overhead as he crawled between containers. A shadow fell across his path. Elena stood there, her gun trained on him, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. "Don't move," she whispered, but her hands were shaking. "Elena, please." Marcus slowly raised his hands. "You don't have to do this. You don't understand what these people are capable of," she said, her voice barely audible over the gunfire. "They have my sister." The pieces clicked into place for Marcus. "That's why you've been helping them. They're using her as leverage." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I just wanted Sophia back." A burst of automatic gunfire stitched across the container next to them. Elena flinched, and Marcus saw his chance. He lunged forward, not to attack her, but to tackle her to safety as bullets shredded the air where she'd been standing. They hit the ground hard, rolling behind a concrete pillar. Elena's gun skittered away into the shadows. "Where is she?" Marcus asked urgently. "Your sister. Where are they keeping her?" "A boat in the harbor," Elena gasped. "The Anastasia." "But Marcus, if Volkov doesn't get those diamonds—" "He'll kill her anyway," Marcus finished. "Men like him don't leave witnesses." The gunfire was intensifying. Morrison's team was holding their own, but barely. Marcus could see one of her officers down, blood pooling beneath him. They were running out of time. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He pulled the backpack from his shoulders and thrust it toward Elena. "Take them," he said. She stared at him in shock. "What?" "Take the diamonds to Volkov. Tell him you captured me, that you're bringing him what he wants. Get close to him." Elena's eyes widened as she understood. "Marcus, that's suicide, even if I could get close enough." "Morrison!" Marcus shouted over the chaos. When the detective looked his way, he held up 3 fingers, then pointed toward Volkov's position. She nodded, understanding his signal. Marcus turned back to Elena. "In 3 minutes, Morrison's team is going to create a diversion on the east side. Volkov will move to coordinate his defense. That's your window. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." Marcus pressed something small and hard into her palm. She looked down to see a grenade he'd taken from one of the fallen mercenaries. "Your sister deserves a chance at a real life. So do you." The sound of approaching boots forced them deeper into cover. Marcus could see Volkov's men closing in from multiple directions, their tactical formation tightening like a noose. Elena clutched the backpack and looked at Marcus with something between gratitude and despair. "If we don't make it out of this—" "We will," Marcus said firmly. "But if we don't, at least we'll go down fighting for something that matters." Morrison's voice crackled over a megaphone. "This is your final warning. Surrender now or face the consequences." Volkov's response was another barrage of gunfire. Marcus checked his watch. 2 minutes. He kissed Elena quickly on the forehead. "Remember, get close to him first. Don't give him time to think." Elena nodded, steeling herself. She slung the backpack over her shoulder and stepped out of cover, hands raised in surrender. "Dmitri!" she called out. "I have them. I have the diamonds." The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Marcus held his breath as Elena walked towards certain death, carrying $200 million in stolen gems and the hopes of everyone who'd been caught in this deadly web. 1 minute and counting. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town felt like stepping into a tomb. Marcus gripped the duffel bag containing the diamonds, his knuckles white against the canvas straps. Detective Sarah Chen moved silently beside him, her service weapon drawn but lowered. The plan was simple in theory. Use Marcus as bait to draw out Viktor Kozlov and his remaining men, then spring the trap with FBI agents positioned throughout the building. But as they crossed the threshold into the cavernous space, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into their own execution. "Remember," Chen whispered, her voice barely audible. "Keep him talking. The longer we can drag this out, the better our chances." Dust motes danced in the pale shafts of light filtering through broken windows high above. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts at stealth, the sound bouncing off concrete walls and rusted machinery left behind by whatever business had once operated here. A slow clap began from somewhere in the shadows ahead. The sound was deliberate, mocking, and it made Marcus's blood run cold. "Bravo, Mr. Sullivan." Victor Kozlov stepped into view, flanked by 3 armed men. The crime boss looked exactly as Marcus had imagined, silver-haired, impeccably dressed despite the decrepit surroundings, with eyes that held no warmth. 23 years I have waited for this moment. 23 years of hunting, of searching, of watching good men die for those stones you carry so carelessly. Marcus forced himself to stand straighter. "Well, here I am, and here are your diamonds." He held up the bag but didn't move closer. "Let's make this trade and be done with it." Kozlov smiled, a predatory expression that never reached his eyes. "Ah, but you misunderstand. There is no trade here. You have something that belongs to me and I simply take it back. The only question is how much you suffer before you die." "These diamonds cost my family everything," Marcus said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "My daughter was kidnapped because of them. My life was turned upside down. What makes them worth so much blood?" "Blood?" Kozlov laughed, a harsh sound in the empty space. "My friend, these stones have been bathed in blood since the day they were cut. They were mined by slaves, sold by warlords, and stolen from me by a man who thought he could disappear with my fortune. That treehouse where you found them? It belonged to James Morrison, my former associate, who decided 23 years ago that he deserved a larger share of our partnership." Chen had been slowly edging to the left, trying to get a better angle, but one of Kozlov's men tracked her movement with his rifle. She froze. "Morrison thought he was clever," Kozlov continued. "Thought he could hide the diamonds and wait for the heat to die down before retrieving them. But he underestimated my patience. I found him eventually, of course. He died slowly, but he died without telling me where he had hidden my property." "So you've been searching ever since?" Marcus said. "Searching, yes, waiting. Watching that neighborhood where he once lived, knowing that someday, somehow, those diamonds would surface." Kozlov's eyes glittered with something close to madness. And then, a desperate construction worker tears down an old treehouse and finds the greatest treasure of his miserable life. A sound from somewhere behind them made everyone freeze, a small clatter, like a piece of debris falling. Kozlov's men immediately raised their weapons, scanning the shadows. "Did you really think I would come here alone?" Kozlov asked, his voice now sharp with suspicion. "Or perhaps you thought your police friends could surround me like some common criminal?" The warehouse suddenly erupted with movement. Gunfire exploded from multiple directions as FBI agents emerged from concealment, their tactical lights cutting through the gloom. Marcus dove behind a concrete pillar, clutching the diamond bag, as bullets sparked off metal and sent chips of concrete flying. Chen rolled behind an overturned table and returned fire, her training evident in her controlled bursts. "Marcus, stay down!" One of Kozlov's men went down immediately, crying out as he fell. But the crime boss himself had vanished, melting back into the maze of abandoned machinery with the fluid grace of someone who had survived decades of such encounters. "He's moving toward the east exit," an FBI agent shouted over the gunfire. Marcus found himself caught in a nightmare of muzzle flashes and ricocheting bullets. The duffel bag felt impossibly heavy in his hands, millions of dollars worth of diamonds that had already cost so many lives. Part of him wanted to just throw it into the middle of the firefight and let whoever survived claim it. But then he thought of Emma, safe now but forever changed by what these stones had brought into their lives. He thought of the terror in her eyes when she'd been taken, the weeks of not knowing if he'd ever see her again. The shooting suddenly stopped, leaving only the ringing silence of enclosed gunfire and the groans of the wounded. The morning sun cast long shadows through the courthouse windows as Marcus adjusted his tie for what felt like the 100th time. 3 months had passed since that night in the warehouse. 3 months of depositions, federal investigations, and sleepless nights wondering if any of Kozlov's remaining associates would come looking for revenge. "You ready for this?" Detective Sarah Chen asked, appearing beside him in the hallway. She looked different in her dress uniform, the Medal of Valor gleaming on her chest, recognition for her role in bringing down one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Marcus nodded, though his hands still trembled slightly. "As ready as I'll ever be?" The courtroom was packed. FBI agents, federal prosecutors, journalists, and curious onlookers filled every seat. Marcus spotted his sister Elena in the front row, her encouraging smile giving him strength. She'd flown in from Phoenix the night before, finally believing his wild story after months of media coverage. The prosecution calls Marcus Rivera to the stand. The walk to the witness box felt endless. Marcus caught sight of Victor Kozlov at the defendant's table, the man who'd terrorized him looking diminished in his orange jumpsuit, heavy shackles around his wrists and ankles. Their eyes met briefly, and Kozlov's cold stare sent a chill down Marcus's spine, but the fear wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was just a reminder of how far he'd come. "Mr. Rivera," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court how you first discovered the diamonds that led to this case." Marcus took a deep breath and began recounting the story that had changed his life forever. The abandoned construction site, the treehouse that seemed like a perfect hiding spot from his troubles, the loose floorboard that revealed a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. "I thought I'd won the lottery," he admitted, earning a few chuckles from the gallery. "I had no idea I was signing up for a nightmare." As he testified about Kozlov's men tracking him down, the chase through the city, the terror of being hunted by killers, Marcus felt something unexpected: closure. Each detail he shared felt like another weight lifted from his shoulders. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal but expected. They painted Marcus as a thief who'd stolen the diamonds first, a desperate man who'd fabricated danger to gain sympathy. But the evidence was overwhelming. Forensics from the warehouse, testimony from Chen and the FBI team, financial records tracing the diamonds back to the original heist 23 years ago. When Marcus finally stepped down from the witness stand, he felt drained but victorious. The trial's conclusion came 2 days later. Marcus sat in the gallery as the jury foreman stood to read the verdict. Kozlov was found guilty on all counts: racketeering, conspiracy, attempted murder, weapons charges. The sentence was life without possibility of parole. As the bailiffs led Kozlov away, the crime boss turned one last time toward Marcus. Instead of hatred, there was something like respect in his eyes, the acknowledgement of a worthy adversary. Then he was gone, disappearing through the courthouse doors into federal custody. Outside, the autumn air felt crisp and clean. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, watching the media pack up their equipment and the crowds disperse. Chen approached, extending her hand. "So, what's next for you?" she asked. Marcus smiled, pulling out a business card from his wallet. "Rivera Construction Services," he said, showing her the simple design. "Turns out the FBI's reward for recovering stolen property is pretty generous. I'm thinking of specializing in historic renovations." Chen laughed. "No more tree houses, I hope." "Definitely not." Elena joined them, slipping her arm through Marcus's. "I'm proud of you, little brother. Dad would have been too." The mention of their father brought tears to Marcus's eyes. Throughout this entire ordeal, he'd thought often about the man who'd taught him the value of honest work, who'd raised them to do the right thing even when it was difficult. Marcus liked to think he'd finally lived up to that example. A month later, Marcus stood in front of a renovated Victorian house in the Mission District, his first official project. The elderly owner, Mrs. Chen, no relation to the detective, had hired him to restore her grandmother's home after seeing his story on the news. "You're the young man who caught that criminal," she'd said during their initial meeting. "I trust someone with that kind of integrity with my family's history." As Marcus packed up his tools at the end of another satisfying day, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, old fears surfaced. But the message was innocuous, a potential client interested in kitchen renovation. The paranoia would probably never completely fade, but Marcus had learned to live with it. He'd survived something extraordinary, found courage he never knew he possessed, and emerged with a future brighter than anything he'd imagined possible. The diamonds were gone, returned to their rightful owners' insurance companies, but Marcus had discovered something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that he could face whatever challenges life threw at him. He drove home through the city streets, free at last.